Greetings, folks. This is Scott with Game Audio Institute, and we're basically going to be dealing with Unity. If you've been watching this series up till now, we installed Unity and everything like that, and we've installed the code, the Microsoft Studio Code code editor. So we're going to get into the scripting very, very quickly, but I do want to kind of just spend a teeny little bit of time and focus a little bit more on Unity itself. So let's take a look right now at what we got. All right, so we're here already inside Unity, and let's take a look at what we've got. Basically, I want to introduce you to the parts and pieces of Unity, okay? So everything that you have dealt with here, you're probably used to dealing with this kind of stuff if you were ever dealing with any kinds of 3D modeling programs like Maya or Blender or, After Effects or things like that. But for sure, if you've come from a DAW-based background, this is going to look quite a lot less familiar. So bear with us and we'll get you through it pretty quickly. Okay, so the deal is that we have these areas that are called views. These are basically the areas that pretty much do the heavy lifting inside the game. And so the first one to talk about, we have the project view. And the project view is pretty much all of the sort of permanent assets that are going to be inside your game, essentially. So in other words, anything gets deleted from the project, it's going to be gone from the game permanently. It's not going to be there anymore. So you got to watch that. It's also this assets folder is pretty much like the folder that contains all of the actual real assets in your game. And those can, of course, be sound files, 3D things, textures, all kinds of stuff, essentially. But just keep in mind that whatever is going to be in the assets folder is kind of permanent to your game. It's unchangeable, essentially. Okay, so that's going to be an important thing. We're going to go on to what's called the hierarchy and the scene view, and we'll also talk about how we get around in the scene view, which I think is a good, useful thing to know. So the hierarchy and the scene view are basically the two views that are sort of joined together at the hip, if you will. What it is that the hierarchy is the names of the objects that are in the scene, and everything in the scene is a game object. So you have the project, and then you have the scene, which is the next thing down. So if you think the project is the game, then the scene is basically as close as you can get to something like a game level inside the game, right? The scene actually contains these game objects, but many times you can use scripts to create new objects or spawn new objects in there and things like that. So it's not necessarily a permanent place, things that can be, taken in and out of the scene all the time. So it's kind of a dynamic sort of place. So this is the hierarchy and the area, and this is the scene view. So the deal in this particular case is that the scene view is showing you the 3D placement of the objects that are listed by name in the hierarchy. So that's basically the deal there. So this is just a quick overview. You can obviously watch other videos if you want to see much more in-depth information on what the hierarchy does and all that other kind of stuff. There's some pretty cool stuff. A basic principle would be that if you're in the project view, you're going to be seeing folders and files. If you're going to be here in the hierarchy, you're going to be seeing what are called parents and children. And you can get more into that later on as to what that actually entails. But if we're going straight for this sort of scripting thing, this is, again, you can probably watch other videos on this sort of thing if you need to. So anyway, that's basically the deal there. And then we can get into the inspector. Now what happens is that there's all these things that are basically game objects inside the game. And the inspector shows all of the characteristics of the game objects in that you've selected, or the game object that you've selected. Everything inside here is a game object. So if I click on this is going to show me the characteristics of that particular game object. All game objects contain something called a transform. The transform is basically the position, the rotation, and the scale of any game object inside the game. And everyone's got to have at least this, no matter what, even if it's a totally blank object with nothing in it. Which like this one basically is. But for example, I have other things in here, for example, like the environment or the main cube, and that has a lot of sub objects and things like that. And they have characteristics of different kinds here listed in the inspector. When you write scripts and things like that, you will be putting them on the inspector. When you actually change variables of some kind or another, you'll be doing that all in the inspector. So this is going to be something you're going to become very familiar with. And that sort of stuff, essentially. So we can get more into those kinds of things. I do want a little bit sort of spend a little time talking about the scene view. There's actually some interesting stuff there. Basically, you have several different cursor tools that are here that actually explain how you can do certain things inside the game view. But you also need to kind of get around in the game view as well. And it's useful to have a 2-button mouse if you don't already. If you came from like Mac land and you're like sitting there with your trackpad or something like that, you can kind of get by to some extent. But it really does help to have a 2-button mouse inside this game because if you click on this, this is how you can actually kind of navigate around. This is the best way to navigate around inside a 3D game engine. So basically the deal is, in this case, you want to have what's called fly-through mode. Okay, so fly-through mode is going to basically get you there. And we're going to go back. So these two keys are really commonly done in things like real-time strategy games and stuff like that. So what happens in this particular case is this is basically the W key to move forward, the S key to move back. What happens is that if you are, selecting something, you can pretty much basically have that right click on there. And then what happens is that you're sort of moving around your viewing angle, and then you move relative to the viewing angle, essentially. And that's sort of basically how things are going. So this is kind of the basic way that this is going to go around, essentially. Okay. So that will help there, and this will help you move things around. So basically, W moves you forward, S moves you back, A moves you to the left or tracks you to the left, D moves you to the right or tracks you to the right, or strafing. If you have a first-person shooter game, you use those controls. There's also Q to go down, I believe. Yep, and E to go up. So those are the quick, sort of controls. And that will pretty much kind of cover the basics about kind of how to get around inside the game engine. There's a lot of cool things you can do with the views. I'm not going to do anything with them, but you can potentially put views on different monitors. If you have a big monitor, you can stick them all, in different panes. You can pop them out. So for example, if I had the project view, I could actually kind of, if I didn't want to attach it to anything, I could just literally have it popped out like this. Or I can bring it back in here like this. There's lots of different options as far as what you can do with it, essentially. So they're very flexible, actually. It's quite flexible. It's a quite flexible system, actually. So it's pretty cool that way. Anyway, so I hope this will help you out, and we'll definitely get into some more scripting stuff in a little bit. So we'll see you there. Take care.